How's it going, sir? My understanding, you were in the room when someone was shot?
Holding the gun, yeah.
Okay, alrighty.
What do you need?
Well, I know your name, so it's
Let me call you back, okay?
Let me get with my lieutenant and see where we want you to hang out, okay?
I have whatever you want to do. Whatever.
Yes, sir. All right, give me just a second.
She handed me an empty gun, and we only put loads when we were ready to shoot. And what it was prepped. Yep. Earplugs, everything. So, you want water or something now? I want to find props to get a cigarette from them. I got one. They're gone. What do you got?
I got medium, marble.
Take it. How is she?
As of right now, her status is questionable. That's why we called the airline.
So that was actor Alec Baldwin on the set of Rust just moments after he fatally shot the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The body cam footage was released this week by the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office, in which it shows Baldwin holding the gun before the tragic incident, as well as the aftermath of the shooting in which Hutchins is on the ground, surrounded by first responders. Well, we'll show you the video, but I must warn you, it's hard to watch.
New body cam footage shows the chaotic moment when officers arrived on the Rust film set after a gun went off in actor Alec Baldwin's hand, killing the film cinematographer and injuring its director.
32 Santa Fe, one female shot in the chest, male shot in the stomach, requesting air flight.
The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office released the video on Monday, which showed medics and officers tending to cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and film director Joel Souza. They are then brought out on stretchers and rushed into an ambulance.
Mr. Baldwin.
Baldwin, who's dressed as an Old West gunslinger, speaks with a police officer at the scene.
My understanding, you were in the room when someone was shot?
Holding the gun, yeah.
Okay, alrighty.
What do you need? She handed me an empty gun, and we only put loads when we were ready to shoot. And what it was prepped.
42-year-old Hutchins was killed during the filming in October when the revolver Baldwin was holding fired a live round that struck her in the chest and lodged in the shoulder of Souza. Souza survived the gunshot wound.
He's good. He's got a broken shoulder blade.
Baldwin was later questioned by police.
And what I'm curious about is what came out of that bullet that went through her body and into his shoulder.
That's pretty powerful.
He told them the gun that went off in his hand was given to him by armorer Hannah Gutierrez.
She hands me the gun. I'm assuming she's done it the right way. She's done it the last 2 weeks. I put it in the holster. I pull it out slow. We're rehearsing. We're not filming anything. I pull it out slow, turn, cock the pistol, bang, it goes up, and she hits the ground.
Baldwin, who is also a producer on the film, has been named in several lawsuits filed in connection with Hutchins' death, including one by her husband. Baldwin denies responsibility for her death and says live rounds should never have been allowed onto the set of the Western film at Bonanza Creek Ranch in New Mexico.
That's a bullet. So as I suspected, somebody put a live round in the gun. If that's a bullet that was pulled out of his shoulder, then someone loaded a live round into the gun I was holding.
I'm Sergeant Zook.
The body cam footage also showed an initial conversation with Gutierrez, the film's armorer. Police said a formal decision on criminal charges would depend on further forensic work.
So you're in charge of the...
Baldwin said in his police statement that a very important question for Gutierrez is whether she ever commingled live rounds with theatrical rounds in her kit.
We're going to escort you down to our sheriff's office.
The state of New Mexico last week fined Rust Movie Productions the maximum amount possible, $137,000, for what it called willful safety lapses leading to the death of Hutchins.
Join me now with a legal perspective is criminal defense attorney and anchor at Law and Crime Network, Bob Bianchi. Bob, thank you for joining me. So, Bob, criminal charges are still possible in this shooting. We've heard from Alec Baldwin, who says he didn't pull the trigger. Okay. So what do you make of this? Where do you think this is going? And do you think anyone is going to be criminally charged?
Well, first of all, I just love the statement that we're seeing right now. I was holding the gun. What do you want? I mean, it's just so tone deaf. But look, we've talked about this before, and I know that a lot of people have like a feeling about what should happen. I mean, clearly there was negligence, which is a civil case, and multiple civil suits have been filed. But what prosecutors have to look at in bringing a criminal charge is whether or not the conduct was reckless. And so you got to kind of define what these terms mean. Reckless generally means a conscious disregard for a known risk, as opposed to an accident where something happens that, just happened by what happened here. She got shot, and that's a civil case for sure. But was there a conscious disregard for a known risk? It's very difficult for prosecutors to prove, and they want to make sure they have evidence that suggests that the defendant, in this case it would be Baldwin, knew or should have known that the weapon was loaded. And based on the facts that we know right now, Stephanie, I think that that's a bridge too far for prosecutors at this point.
When people continue to call it an accidental shooting, is it appropriate to still call it accidental when criminal charges could still be filed and there's still an investigation going on?
Well, at a minimum, it's accidental, and that's fair. There's no question about that. Somebody should not have been shot. It rises to the level of a crime when a prosecutor makes a determination, either a grand jury or a judge sign a complaint that there's probable cause to believe that the conduct went beyond just mere negligence, but rather to recklessness, which is that conscious disregard. Then it's no longer an accident, it's a crime.
Yeah, and I understand Baldwin's perspective, which is like, why was there live ammunition in this prop gun, if you will? So I get that argument. I'm not a huge fan of Alec Baldwin, but everyone deserves due process, and we want to make sure that justice is served properly in this case. With that being said, I mean, how much at fault is the person who's responsible for managing the prop guns?
I think that person bears a lot more culpability with regard to this and that's what Alec Baldwin's defense is going to be. Like, hey, I have an armorer there. I have a person that's supposed to be checking this. There should never be a live round in a weapon. And we actually hire a person specifically so that does not happen. And not only that person is responsible for making sure it doesn't happen, that person actually handed him the weapon with a live round in it. That is where you could say your job specifically is to ensure that a live round is not in that gun. The actors are just presuming you're doing your job. So that is where a prosecutor could say, there was a conscious disregard for a known risk because specifically her job was to make sure something like this didn't happen. So it wasn't intentional. It wasn't that she meant it to happen, but nevertheless, it was such a high level of negligence that it rises to recklessness. I see definite possibility there, Stephanie.
And when you talk about recklessness, I've read about some of the text messages and concerns expressed, during and before the set of Rust, while they were on the set of Rust, about their prop guns. So again, the question is how reckless, and then who exactly is responsible. Do you think it's unusual that they did this video dump with all of this information this week? The Hutchins family is surprised by the massive data dump, and they're kind of concerned about it. Is that unusual?
Well, for me, it was. I mean, I did not release any information pending an investigation unless I felt that information was necessary for me to get public support in order to assist in that investigation. But when you have a high-profile case like this, sometimes the tail wags the dog. And law enforcement feels they need to get it out there as soon as possible in order to assuage the need for information by the public. I just never allowed that to happen. I played it clean each and every time. So I don't see any benefit that law enforcement received by sending this information out. So I can understand how the family's like, well, why is it being sent out now prior to a determination being made as to whether or not criminal charges will be filed or not filed? Law enforcement always wants to keep its information close to the vest so witnesses are not tainted. Individuals they speak to don't have advance information. I've had this happen where something gets reported in the paper and the person's saying X, Y, and Z, and when you really drill down, it's not what they observed, it's because what they read in the news. So all that's important. And Stephanie, one last thing, you just said something before that was very interesting and true. The only hook that I see with Baldwin right now is that he was a producer, so therefore he was responsible for making sure everybody on that crew, including the armorer, were acting in an appropriate fashion. So if I were inclined as a prosecutor to move forward with Baldwin, it would probably be on that theory that he had managerial responsibility over the armorer.
Yeah, definitely. Now, really quickly, I want to shift gears. We're almost out of time, but I really wanted to get this in. The Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, it's been just a complete circus, if you will. I mean, it's captured the attention of people all over the globe just because it's interesting to see how these Hollywood celebrities lived and this just back and forth, up and down relationship that they had. A lot of strange things said in court. Originally, people were siding with Amber Heard, saying, this is kind of Johnny Depp's fault. He's an abusive guy. And, they had kind of like a vision and an idea in their head what was really going on. But we've learned a lot in court. In fact, we even heard evidence that Amber Heard admitted to hitting Johnny Depp. So that's a problem.
We always have this problem as lawyers. I mean, the court of public opinion is ahead of the actual trial itself. And people make informed opinions and conclusions without even looking at the evidence. And of course, we're in an environment where you have to be very careful that there are people who are wrongly accused of doing things, especially high-profile people that have a ulterior motive for saying these things. But I will say this, I'm covering this case on my network, gavel to gavel with regard to it. And I am shocked at the distinction, if you will, between the way it was portrayed in the public and the actual testimony. There is not a person that is not watching Johnny Depp testify, at least right now. We haven't heard from her. But we've got a lot of audio tape, so it's right there for your ears to hear him really being abused, in my mind, verbally and emotionally by Ms. Heard. And then the other witnesses that have testified, including a psychologist who did an evaluation of her, talking about her having a borderline personality disorder, was very, very powerful, because everything that psychologist testified to about her examination of Ms. Heard, who she found to be lying based upon scales they have in these tests, was very consistent with what we're all seeing in the testimony, excuse me, in the audio tapes during the actual direct case by Johnny Depp. So there was nothing about the psychologist's testimony that was different from what we're already seeing. So it's really been something else. Whether he wins a defamation case, that's a really high burden. But she also accused him of sexual violence. So if the jury believes that she made that reference to Johnny Depp because she never used his name, that's where I think a jury could come back and say, this isn't even subject to dispute. We don't believe her. It's clear from these tapes that she's setting him up in many instances. She's fabricated things. She's over-exaggerated things. We have a psychologist essentially saying those are the elements of a person that has a histrionic personality disorder. But the sexual violence piece, that has not been proven. So she said that. It's slander per se under the law. That's where I see Johnny Depp could win. But either way, Stephanie, I'll say this, and I said it from the very beginning. Johnny Depp wins by merely being in that courtroom and testifying, because the narrative has completely changed. You go on one of these things, and you can see that firsthand about how the public opinion has completely turned 180 degrees in favor of Johnny Depp.
Yeah, and I thought it was really strange, too, in their relationship, the fact that Amber Heard had all of these, cell phone videos and audio recordings. And just imagine being in a relationship with somebody where they're basically setting you up, filming private conversations and videoing it. You can't assume that they might have good intentions with that. And so, again, it's very revealing, really strange, and sad to see. Now, there was one moment that's going viral online, and I just wanted to play this one really quickly for our audience. It's of Amber Heard's attorney objecting to his own question. So let's take a look at that. Roll tape.
You didn't know what could cause damage to Mr. Depp's hand while you were there on March 8th, correct?
Dr. Kipper told me he sustained an injury on one of his fingers.
Objection, hearsay.
Wait, you asked the question.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay, you said it's...
But you asked the question, sir. I thought that was pretty funny. But there have been some legal analysts who have suggested that maybe Amber Heard needs new attorneys, or that they are just not very qualified. Just your quick assessment on how her attorneys have handled the case so far.
I think the attorneys all the way around are shocking to me, although maybe not shocking. I've seen high-profile people have lawyers that walk in, they have all the money in the world, and you're like, what in God's name were you thinking about getting this lawyer? I mean, it is funny. It was hearsay, but he asked the question, so he objected to his own question. I've been doing this for over 30 years, Stephanie. I have never at a trial ever seen somebody object to an answer to his own question. So it's kind of funny, but yeah, I'm surprised people like this You get a good criminal trial lawyer in there, that's what you need. You need a civil lawyer to tell you what the law is, but you need a beat down, take a bat out, hit people over the head that have a little bit more sophistication and nuance than to ask an open-ended question. Even you don't have to be a lawyer to know that, on cross-examination where you could get burned with an answer like that. So I'm really shocked at the lawyering here.
Totally shocking. Well, Bob, we appreciate your insight, and thank you for breaking down these cases. And we'll have you back so we can follow up on these. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot.